Shall we do a little bit of painting? Let's do a little bit of painting. We will get me boo cup. Will we get me boo cup? Yes, we'll get me boo cup. And we will listen to some more of You Like It Darker by Stephen King. That's the book we're listening to.
His small circle of friends that some didn't, so he considered himself lucky. He had an acre of garden in Upper Manhattan that he shared with several like-minded horticulturalists. He had discovered Netflix, and he was making inroads in the books he'd always meant to read. He still missed his wife, a victim of breast cancer 5 years previous.
There's actually quite some decent stuff on the Sunday preview this week. It's a shame it didn't work.
Full. Before rising every morning, he
definitely a few bits there that I would be interested in purchasing if I was still actually gave a monkeys about Games Workshop stuff. Anyway, I'm going to put my visor on and then we'll get on with some painting.
The best part of those days, assuming it wasn't raining, snowing, or too cold, was the 9-block walk to Central Park after breakfast. Although he carried a cell phone and used an electronic tablet, had grown dependent on it, in fact, he still preferred the print version of the Times. In the park, he would settle on his favorite bench.
I would say, because Preston is
back to front,
quite a dark-skinned man, that we're looking at a choice between
mid-May,
mocha skin and onyx skin, but maybe onyx is a little bit dark, so we'll go for the mocha.
To see a middle-aged man sitting down on the other end of his bench, although there were plenty of empty ones in the vicinity.
All right, mate, you have a nice look.
The invader of Jameson's morning space looked to be in his mid to late 40s, neither handsome nor ugly, in fact, perfectly nondescript. The same was true of his attire. New Balance walking shoes.
Yes, I agree.
Jeans, a Yankee cap, and a Yankee hoodie with a hood tossed back. Jameson gave him an impatient side glance and prepared to move to another bench.
So we get a dip of the mocha on the palette there.
Please. I sat down here because I need a reasonable sized
brush.
It's not a big one, that one, but I'll pay. He reached into the kangaroo pouch of the hoodie and held out a $20 bill.
A little bit of water.
I don't do favors for strange men, Jameson said and got up. But that's exactly the point, the two of us being strangers. Hear me out. If you say no, that's fine, but please, hear me out. You could... He cleared his throat, and Jameson realized the guy was nervous. Maybe more, maybe scared. You could be saving my life. Jameson considered, then sat down, but as far from the other man as he could while still keeping both butt cheeks on the bench. I'll give you a minute, but if you sound crazy to me, I'm leaving. And put your money away. I don't need it, and I don't want it. The man looked at the bill as if surprised to find it still in his hand, then put it back in the kangaroo pouch. He put his hands on his thighs and looked down at them instead of at Jameson. I'm an alcoholic. 4 months sober. 4 months and 12 days, to be exact. Congratulations, Jameson said. He guessed he meant it, but he was even more ready to get up. To leave the park, if necessary. The guy seemed sane, but Jameson was old enough to know that sometimes the woo-woo didn't come out right away.
Let's see if we've got a reference image we can pull up for.
Once got almost a year.
Your man
think this
there.
Might be my last chance to grab the brass ring. I'm in AA. I know what it is. What's your name,
There
Mr.
we go, there's Preston, so we want...
You can call me Jack. That's good enough. We don't use last names in the program.
Hat are the same colour, and most of his leather work across his belts and things.
So what can I do for you, Jack?
Trousers and gauntlets are the same colour.
I didn't get a sponsor.
That duster is pale bone with
answers your questions.
Tinge of green, I think.
This time,
this will be a sort of turquoise colour and a blue
he said. And you know
sort
how
of
he carried himself?
whatever he's got on under
12
that
years sober,
tunic,
feet on the
under his
ground,
big coat, his
works in
duster. I
sales,
say
like
tunic.
me. He
Tunic
had turned to
appears to be
look
the
at
right
Jameson,
word. So
and now he returned his gaze to his hands. I used to be a hell of a salesman.
let's try and give
For
another
5 years
quick.
I headed the sales department of, well, it doesn't matter. But it was a big deal. You'd know the
spot
company.
of paint. This
That was in San Diego. Now I'm down to peddling greeting
mocha
cards
skin
and
tone.
energy drinks to convenience stores and bodegas in the 5 boroughs. Last rung on the ladder, man. Get to the point, Jameson said, but not harshly. He had become a little interested, in spite of himself. It was not every day that a stranger sat down on your bench and started spilling his shit, especially not in New York. I was just going to check on the Mets. They're off to a good start. Jack rubbed a palm across his mouth. I like this guy I met at the Sundown, so I got up my courage after a meeting and asked him to be my sponsor. In March, this was. He looked me over and said he'd take me on, but only on 2 conditions. That I'd do everything he said and call him if I felt like drinking. Then I'll be calling you every fucking night, I said. And he said, so call me every fucking night, and if I don't answer, talk to the machine. And he asked me if I worked the steps. Do you know what those are? Vaguely. I said I hadn't gotten around to them. He said that if I wanted him to be my sponsor, I'd have to start.
Slow while we let that dry.
He said the first 3 were both the hardest and the easiest.
Okay, and let's try and find a nice turquoise colour.
I can't stop on my own, but with God's help I can, so I'm going to let him help. Jameson grunted.
Blues.
I said I didn't believe in God.
It's greens.
This
browns.
Guy, Randy's his name.
This must be
said
blues,
he didn't give a shit. He told me to get down on my knees every morning and ask this God I didn't believe in to help me stay sober another day. And if I didn't drink, he said for me to get down on my knees before I turned in and thank God for my sober day. Randy asked if I was willing to do that, and I said I was. Because I'd lose him otherwise, you see.
I think that will do for
you were desperate. Exactly.
Scarf.
The gift of desperation. That's what AAs call it. Randy said if I didn't do those prayers and said I was doing them, he'd know. Because he spent 30 years lying his ass off about everything. So, you did it, even though you don't believe in God. I did it, and it's been working. As for my belief that there's no God,
agitator
the
balls
longer I stay sober,
in your dropper box,
the more
if you
that
can.
wavers. If you're going to ask me to pray with you, forget it.
Shaky,
Jack
shaky.
smiled down at his hands. Nope.
Plus, of course, if the
about the on my knees
pigment is settling at the bottom and it's sticking the
last month,
displacer balls to the bottom of the
told me
pot,
to do the 4th step.
they won't make a noise when you shake it. Therefore, you know that you need to shake it some more.
Supposedly searching and fearless.
Hey, I'll get a little smaller brush, I think, for that.
Did you? Yes. Randy said I was supposed to put down the bad stuff, then turn the page and list the good stuff. It took me 10 minutes for the bad stuff. Over an hour for the good stuff. At first I couldn't think of anything good, but finally I wrote, at least I've got a sense of humor. Which I do. Once I got that, I was able to think of a few other things. When I told Randy I had trouble thinking of character strengths, he said that was normal. You drank for almost 30 years, he said. That puts a lot of scars and bruises on a man's self-image. But if you stay sober, the bruises will heal. Then he told me to burn the lists. He said it would make me feel better. Did it? Strangely enough, it did. Anyway, that brings us to this month's request from Randy. More of a demand, I'm guessing, Jameson said, smiling a little. He folded his newspaper and laid it aside. Jack also smiled. I think you're catching the sponsor-sponsee dynamic. Randy told me it was time to do my 5th step.
Okay, I don't think
which
we're
is
needing that again, so we put it away.
Admitted to God to ourselves,
To be honest, we
and to
probably won't
another
need an
human
off skin
being,
again either.
the exact
But
nature
I'll keep
of
it
our
open.
wrongs, Jack said,
Um,
making quote marks with his fingers.
we'll go
I
for
told him
Mystic
okay,
Blue
I'd make a
for
list and read it
tunic.
to him. God could listen in. 2 birds with 1 stone deal. I'm thinking he said no. He said no.
Seems
He
to be
told
another
me
one
to
we
approach
haven't put
a complete stranger. His first suggestion was a priest or a minister,
agitator
but
in
I
yet.
haven't set foot in a church since I was 12, and I have no urge to go back.
That can soon
Whatever I'm
fixed.
coming to believe, and I don't know yet what that is. I don't need to sit in a church pew to help it along. Jameson, no churchgoer himself, nodded. Randy said, just walk up to somebody in Grant Park, or Washington Square Park, or Central Park, and ask him to hear you list your wrongs. Offer a few bucks to sweeten the deal if that's what it takes. Keep asking until someone agrees to listen. He said the hard part would be the asking part, and he was right. Am I... Your first victim was the phrase that came to mind, but Jameson decided it wasn't exactly fair. Am I the first person you've approached? The second. I tried an off-duty cab driver yesterday, and he told me to get lost. Jameson thought of an old New York joke. Out-of-towner approaches a guy on Lexington Avenue and says, can you tell me how to get to City Hall, or should I just go fuck myself? He decided he wasn't going to tell the guy in the Yankee gear to go fuck himself. He would listen, and the next time he met his friend Alex, another retiree, for lunch, he'd have something interesting to talk about. Okay, go for it. Jack reached into the pouch of his hoodie, took out a piece of paper, and unfolded it. When I was in 4th grade, if this is going to be your life story, maybe you better give me that 20 after all. Jack reached into his hoodie with the hand not holding his list of wrongdoings, but Jameson waved him off. Joking. Sure? Yes, but let's not take too long. I've got an appointment at 8:30. This wasn't true, and Jameson reflected that it was good he didn't have the alcohol problems, because according to the TV meetings he'd attended, honesty was a big deal if you did. Keep it speedy. Got it. Here goes. In 4th grade, I got into a fight with another kid. Gave him a bloody lip and nose. When we got to the office, I said it was because he'd called my mother a dirty name. He denied it, of course, but we both got sent home with a note for our parents. Or just my mom, in my case, because my dad left us when I was 2. And the dirty name thing? A lie. I was having a bad day, and I thought I'd feel better if I got into a fight with this kid I didn't like. I don't know why I didn't like him. I guess there was a reason, but I don't remember what it was.
There we go. I realise that these are quite...
I started drinking in junior
saturated colours.
My mother had a bottle of vodka she kept in the freezer.
I think
I'd
they'll
swig
work
from it, then add water.
right. Okay.
She finally caught me, and the vodka disappeared from the freezer.
Wash on Preston's face, which will be using a dark skin wash.
But I left it alone after that. By then, it was probably mostly water anyway.
Pretty obvious reasons, I would think.
I saved my allowance and chore money and got some old wino to buy me nips. He'd buy 4 and keep 1.
A whole lot less.
I enabled his drinking. That's what my sponsor would say. Jack shook his head.
We'll come in carefully.
I don't know what happened to that guy.
Try and get
Ralph.
This on here.
His name was.
Without getting any on
wretched
the
Ralph.
scarf that we've just done.
Kids can be cruel. For all I know, he's dead, and I helped kill him. Don't get carried away, Jameson said. I'm sure you have stuff to feel guilty about without having to invent a bunch of might-have-beens. Jack looked up and grinned. When he did, Jameson saw the man actually had tears in his eyes. Not falling, but brimming. Now you sound like Randy. Is that a good thing? I think so. I think I'm lucky I found you. Jameson discovered he actually felt lucky to have been found. What else have you got on that list? Because time's passing.
If you don't have access to something like this dark skin wash,
I lied. Cheated my way through. I was good at it.
maybe a very dark umber
big one.
or
The student advisor
Agrax
I
Earth
had my
Shade or
senior
something
year
like
was a
that
coke
will
addict.
do the job.
I won't go into how I found that out. Like you said, time's passing, but I did.
Okay.
And I made a deal with him.
Right,
Good
then. Let's get this
recommends in
duster done.
exchange for a key of coke. Plus, of course,
I
he'd
think
pay
for
for
the
the dope I
duster,
wasn't into charity.
we are going to be
Key?
looking
As in
at
kilo? Jameson asked. His eyebrows went up
sort of a
close to the way to
bone
his
colour.
hairline. Right.
Nice
I
pale
brought
one.
it in through the Canadian border, tucked into the spare tire of my old
So
Ford.
with that in mind, I think
Trying
we'll
to
be
look like any
using
other college
Vallejo
kid
Express
who'd spent a
colour
semester break having
Mummy
fun getting laid
White.
in Toronto. But my heart was beating like crazy, and I bet my blood pressure
Which
was
again
redlining.
needs
The car
a
in front of
wobbling.
me at the checkpoint got tossed completely, but I got waved right through after showing my
Provided it
driver's
dries
license.
a similar
Of course,
colour
things were
to
much looser back
it
then.
appears on the
He paused, then said,
palette.
I overcharged him for the key, too. Pocketed the difference.
We should
But
be
you didn't use any of the cocaine
laughing.
yourself. No, that was never my scene. I blew a little dope once in a while, but what I really wanted, still want, is grain alcohol. I lied to my bosses, but eventually that gave out. It wasn't like college, and there was nobody to mule coke for. Not that I found, anyway. What did you do, exactly? Massaged my cell sheets. Made up appointments that didn't exist to explain days when I was too hungover to come in. Jiggered expense sheets. That first job was a good one. The sky was the limit, and I blew it. After they let me go, I decided what I really needed was a change of location. In AA, that's called a geographic cure. Never works, but I didn't know that. Seems simple enough now. If you put an asshole on a plane in Boston, an asshole gets off in LA, or Denver, or Des Moines. I fucked up a second job. Not as good as the first one, but good. That was in San Diego. And what I decided then was that I needed to get married and settle down. That would solve the problem. So I got married to a nice girl who deserved better than me. It lasted 2 years. Me lying right down the line about my drinking, inventing non-existent business appointments to explain why I was home late, inventing non-existent flu symptoms to explain why I was going in late or not at all. I could have bought stock in one of those breath mint companies, Altoids Breath Savers. But was she fooled? I'm guessing not, Jameson said. Listen, are we approaching the end here? Yes. 5 more minutes. Promise. Okay. There were arguments that kept getting worse. Stuff got thrown occasionally, and not just by her. There was a night when I came home around midnight, stinking drunk, and she started in on me. You know, all the usual jabber. And all of it was true. I felt like she was throwing poison darts at me, and never missing. Jack was looking at his hands again. His mouth was turned down at the corners so severely that for a moment he looked to Jameson like Emmett Kelly, that famous sad-faced clown. You know what came into my mind while she was yelling at me? Glenn Ferguson, that boy I beat up in the 4th grade. How good it felt. Like squeezing the pus out of an infected boil. I thought it would be good to beat her up. And for sure no one would send me home with a note from my mother because my mom died
Bloke
a
in
year
this
after I
story sounds like
graduated
a
from
bloody
Brown.
saint.
Whoa, Jameson said. Feeling good about this uninvited confession took a hike. Unease replaced it. He wasn't sure he wanted to hear what came next. I left, Jack said, but I was scared enough to know I had to do something about my drinking. That was the first time I tried AA, out there in San Diego. I was sober when I came back to New York, but that didn't last. Tried again, and that didn't last either. Neither did the third. But now, I've got Randy, and this time I might make it, partly thanks to you. He held out his hand. Well, you're welcome, Jameson said, and took it. There is one more thing, Jack said. His grip was very strong. He was looking into Jameson's eyes and smiling. I did leave, but I cut that bitch's throat before I did. I didn't stop drinking, but it made me feel better. The way beating up Glenn Ferguson made me feel better. And that wino I told you about, kicking him around made me feel better too. Don't know if I killed him, but I sure did bust him up. Jameson tried to pull back, but the grip was too strong. The other hand was once more inside the pocket of the Yankee
or three
hoodie.
to dry.
I really want to stop drinking, and I can't do a complete fifth step without admitting that I seem to really enjoy. What felt like a streak of hot white light slid between Jameson's ribs, and when Jack pulled the dripping ice pick away,
leathers that would come
once
out
more
next.
tucking it into the pocket of his hoodie, Jameson realized he couldn't breathe. Killing people is a character defect, I know, and probably the chief of my wrongs. He got to his feet. Thank you, sir. I don't know what your name is, but you've helped me so much. He started away towards Central Park West, then turned back to Jameson, who was grasping blindly for his times, as if perhaps a quick scan of the arts and leisure section would put everything right.
So while we're waiting for that to dry,
you'll be in my prayers tonight.
Pause our book, and we will have a look at the miniatures that we were painting in the last stream as they're completed now. And here are those settlers, all done and dusted, all nice and complete. And this is why I was using that limited palette and using the same 3 or 4 colours on all the miniatures. It gives them all a nice tied together look, and they look, whilst they look like individuals, because we're using the same colour palette and because we're tying those colours together nicely, especially with the umber wash over everything, it ties them together and it brings them in and gives them a kind of unit coherence that you wouldn't get otherwise. So there's this guy with his pipe pistol. And we have this one who I'm going to call Old Blurry Pants, because it didn't matter what I did. She came out as a blurry picture with a sniper rifle or hunting rifle by the look of it. We have, I don't know if it's just me, but don't you think this looks like Jennifer Saunders a little bit? This is a young Jennifer Saunders, very angry with a sawed-off shotgun. And of course, we have this sad-looking bloke with his stim pack in hand and pipe pistol in the other. It's nothing quite like going into battle prepared. If I get shot, at least I've got a stim pack. And there we have the two together. She looks like she's escorting him to the bad place. And swap them round. So Jen's at the front there. I'm going to call her Jennifer Saunders from now on. This is Jennifer Saunders. Oh, the only picture I managed to take of Old Blurry Pants that isn't super blurry. There we go. She doesn't look happy about it, though. And there we go. Back to Old Blurry Pants. I don't think there are any other... Nobody else has posted anything recently. Let's see if we've got anything in the What You Doing. We do. We have old Wolfenstone, who has been freehanding some lovely blue and white checkerboard there on the wrists of that orc, and a dog tooth pattern, it looks like, on the pauldron, the shoulder pad there. Very nice, Wolfenstone, very nice. And you hated every minute of this. I am not surprised, especially looking at how thin they are, just around where the spikes are. That is more work than I'm willing to do. And of course, we have this beautiful little grot from Welshie, who's also been freehanding some checkerboard there, but black and white this time. Love that skin, mate. Very nice indeed. If anybody wants to share their work, feel free to join the Discord. It's free, unlike many other content creators. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of hate the fact that people charge their Discord. I think it takes their piss a little bit, charging people to come to your Discord. They do have a sort of a subscribers only section of the Discord where we will chat about, you know, other things, and you can ask me more direct questions about my painting methods and things. So there's that. I mean, if you do want to support the channel, we have one of these and one of these. I would honestly prefer you used Ko-fi. I tend to use it more, where I will post some pictures of completed miniatures and things, and maybe even tutorials and such, if there is a want for them. But there we go. Let me have a quick look at Preston, see if he's dried at all. Ooh. Certainly get in there. We'll give it another second or three, so I'll have a slurp. I'll tell you what I'll do. Actually, I had my pre-order of the new boxed game delivered yesterday, so I've managed to get those undercoated, so we'll have a quick look at those right now. Oh, come here, you. There we go. They're on my patented undercoating stick. So there we have the miniatures, and they are really nicely detailed. I do like the little Z10 alien there, but I'm really looking forward to painting this big bugger, my Deathclaw. As you can see, I will need to do a little bit of work on them off camera before I start painting, because there are bits underneath on pretty much all of them where the primer didn't quite take. And my priming method is Mechanicus Standard Grey or equivalent, then I think it's Ghost Grey they call it from the Colour Forge. It's so Mechanicus Standard Grey all over, usually from quite a low angle to get sort of up and under. Didn't get everything as we showed here, but it kind of works. Then we come in with a Ghost Grey from about 45 degrees on, you know, all the way around, and finally a matte white from the very top straight down, a quick pass left and right, bish bosh, done. And that is how I prime. So I'll put those out of the way for a second. We'll get the audio book back on, and we'll have another look at
Willie's mom
Preston
and Dad
there.
thought their son was strange, with his careful study of dead birds and his collections of dead bugs, and
so
the way
we've got
he
the dark
might
grey
look
on
at
his
drifting
gauntlets and his
clouds for an
trousers.
hour or
So
more.
we'll do that
But
first.
only Roxy would
he
say
says
it out
dark
loud.
grey, it means dark
Willie
brown.
the weirdo, she called him one night at the dinner table while Willie was making,
And we are using
a clown face
desert
in his mashed
ochre
potatoes with gravy for eyes. Willie was 10, Roxy was 12, and getting breasts, of which she was very proud, except when Willie stared at them, which made her feel creepy. Don't call him that, Mother said. She was sharing.
Start with the
But it's true, Roxy said. Father said, I'm sure he gets enough of that at school. He was Richard. Sometimes, often, the family talked about Willie as if he wasn't there, except for the old man at the foot of the table. Do you get that at school? Grandfather asked. He rubbed a finger between his nose and upper lip, his habit after asking a question or answering one. Grandfather was James. Ordinarily, during family meals, he was a silent man, partly because it was his nature and partly because eating had become a chore. He was making slow work of his roast beef. Most of his teeth were gone. I don't know, Willie said. I guess sometimes. He was studying his mashed potatoes. The clown was now grinning a shiny brown grin with small globules of fat for teeth. Sharon and Roxy cleaned up after dinner. Roxy enjoyed doing the dishes with her mother. It was a sexist division of labor, to be sure, but they could have undisturbed conversations about important matters, such as Willie. Roxy said, "He is weird. Admit it. That's why he's in the remedial." Sharon looked around to make sure they were alone. Richard had gone for a walk, and Willie had retired to Grandfather's room with the man Rich sometimes called the old boy and sometimes the roomer. Never Dad or my father. "Willie isn't like other boys," Sharon said. "But we love him anyway, don't we?" Roxy gave it some thought. "I guess I love him, but I don't exactly like him. He's got a bottle filled with fireflies in Grandpa's room. He says he likes to watch them go out when they die. That's weird. He's like a case history in a book called Serial Killers as Children." "Don't you ever say that," Sharon told her. "He can be very sweet." Roxy had never experienced what she'd call sweetness, but thought it better not to say so. Besides, she was still thinking of the fireflies, their little lights going out one by one. "And Grandpa watches right along with him. They're in there all the time, talking. Grandpa doesn't talk to anyone else hardly. Your grandfather has had a hard life. He's really not my grandpa anyway, not by blood, I mean.
Oh,
He might as well be.
I'll fix that in a minute.
Grandpa James and Grandma Elise adopted your father when he was just a baby. It's not like Dad grew up in an orphanage and got adopted at 12 or something. Dad says Grandpa hardly ever talked to him after Grandma Elise died. He says there were nights when they hardly said 6 words to each other. But since he came to live with us, he and Willie go in there and talk up a storm." "It's good they have a connection," Sharon said, but she was frowning down at the soapy water. "It keeps your grandfather tethered to the world, I think. He's very old. Richard came to them late, when James and Elise were already in their 50s. "I didn't think they let people that old adopt," Roxy said. "I don't know how that stuff works," Mother said. She pulled the plug, and the soapy water began to gurgle down the drain. There was a dishwasher, but it was broken, and Father, Richard, kept not getting it fixed. Money had been tight since Grandfather came to live with them, because he only had his pittance of a pension to contribute. Also, Roxy knew, Mom and Dad had already begun saving for her college education. Probably not for Willie's, though, with him being in the remedial and all. He liked clouds and dead birds and dying fireflies, but he wasn't much of a scholar. "I don't think Dad likes Grandpa
Let's
very
try and
much,"
fix that.
Roxy said in a low voice. Mother lowered hers even further, so it was hard to hear over the last few chuckles from the sink. "He doesn't, but rocks.
Sanding
But
sticks.
this
Really
is
cheap.
how
Get him on
families
Amazon.
do. Remember when you have one of your own?" Roxy never intended to have children, but if she did, and one of them turned out like Willie, she thought she'd be tempted to drive him into the deepest, darkest woods, let him out of the car, and just leave him there. Like a wicked stepmother in a fairy tale.
There you go.
She briefly wondered if that made her weird, and decided it didn't. Once she heard her father tell Mother that Willie's career
I like
might
this
turn out to be
super glue
bagging
because it's
groceries
got a
at
brush
Kroger's.
applicator.
James Jonas Fiedler, a.k.a. Grandfather, a.k.a. Grandpa, a.k.a. the old boy, came out of his room, called his den by Sharon, his lair by Richard, for meals, and sometimes he would sit on the back porch and smoke a cigarette, 3 a day. But mostly he stayed in the small back bedroom that had been Mother's study until last year. Sometimes he watched the little TV on top of his dresser, 3 channels, no cable.
We'll definitely give that
Mostly he either
a little
slept
bit
or
of
sat
time
quietly
to
in one of the
cure.
2 wicker chairs looking out of the window. But when Willie came in, he would close the door and talk.
Oh,
Willie would
there
listen,
we go.
and when he asked questions, Grandpa would always answer them. Willie knew most of the answers were untruthful, and he was aware that most of Grandfather's advice was bad advice. Willie was in the remedial, because it allowed him time to
check
think
a
about
few
more
bits.
important things, not because he was stupid. But Willie enjoyed the answers and advice just the same. If it was crazy, so much the better. That night, while his mother and sister were discussing the two of them in the kitchen, Willie asked Grandfather again, just to see if it jibed with earlier stories,
So, chat, what are we
the
up to
weather
today?
had been
Anything
like
interesting?
at Gettysburg.
Anybody want to have a
Grandfather
chat?
rubbed a finger beneath
Because
his
let's be
nose,
fair,
as
that's
if
the point
feeling
of it
for
all.
stubble,
Much as I like
and
putting
ruminated.
stories on for you guys,
Day 1,
it's not really,
cloudy,
you know,
in
really
mid-70s.
be all.
Not bad. Day 2, partly cloudy, and 81. Still not bad. Day 3, the day of Pickett's charge, 87 degrees, with the sun beating down on us like a hammer. And remember, we were in wool uniforms. We all stank of sweat. The weather
Let's get the
report
leathers
matched.
done in
So
copper
far, so
brown,
good.
which will need a bit more.
Were you
of
really
the
there,
zuz.
Grandpa? Yes, said Grandfather with no hesitation. He passed his finger below his nose and above his lip, then began to pick his remaining teeth with a yellow fingernail, extracting a few filaments of roast beef.
Bit more.
And lived to tell the tale. Many did not. Want to know about July 4th, Independence Day? People tend to forget that one because the battle was over. He didn't wait for Willie to answer. Pouring rain, boots sucking mud, men crying like babies. Lee,
There we go.
on his
That was
horse.
reasonably mixed.
Traveler. Yes, traveler. His back was to us. He had blood on his hat and the seat of his breeches. But not his blood. He was unwounded. That man was the devil. Willie picked up the bottle on the windowsill, Heinz Relish on the fading label, and tilted it from side to side, enjoying the dry rustle of the dead fireflies. He imagined it was like the sound of the wind in graveyard grass on a hot July day. Tell me about the flag boy. Grandfather passed his finger between nose and lip. You've heard that story 20 times. Just the ending. That's the part I like. He was 12, going up the hill beside me. Stars and bars flying high. The end of the pole was sucked into a little tin cup on his belt. My mate, Micah LeBlanc, made that cup. We were halfway up Cemetery Hill when the boy got hit spang in the throat. Tell about the blood. His lips parted. His teeth were clenched. In pain, I suppose. Blood squirted out between them. And it gleamed. That's right. The finger took a quick swipe beneath his nose and returned to his teeth where one pesky filament remained. It gleamed like rubies in the sun. And you were really there. Didn't I say so? I was the one who picked up the Dixie flag when that boy went down. I carried it 20 more running steps before we were turned back, not a stone's throw from the rock wall the bluebellies were hiding behind. When we skedaddled, I carried it back down the hill again. Tried to step over the bodies, but I couldn't step over all of them because there were so many. Tell about the fat one. Grandfather rubbed his cheek. Scritch. Then under his nose again. Scratch. When I stepped on his back, he farted. Willie's face twisted in a silent laugh, and he clutched himself. It was what he did when he was amused, and whenever Roxy observed that knotted face and self-hug, she knew he was weird. There, Grandpa said, and finally dislodged a long strand of beef. Feed it to the fireflies. He gave the strand to Willie, who dropped it on top of the dead fireflies in the Heinz jar. Now, tell me about Cleopatra. Which part? The barge. Aha! The barge, is it? Grandfather caressed his philtrum, this time with his fingernail. Scritch. Well, I don't mind. The Nile was so broad we could hardly see across it. But that day it was as smooth as a baby's belly. I had the rudder. Willie leaned forward, rapt. On a day not long after the roast beef and the mashed potatoes that made a clown face, Willie was sitting on a curb after a rainstorm. He had missed the bus going home again, but that was all right. He was watching a dead mole in the gutter, waiting to see if the rushing water would wash it into a sewer grate. A couple of big boys came along, trading arm punches and various profane witticisms. They stopped when they saw Willie. "Look at that kid hugging himself," one said. "Because no girl in her right mind ever would," said the other. "It's the freako," said the first. "Check out those little pink eyes." "And a haircut," said the second. "Looks like somebody sculpted him. Hey, short bus kid." Willie stopped hugging himself and looked up at them. "Your face looks suspiciously like my ass," said the first, and accepted a high five from his companion. Willie looked back down at the dead mole. It was moving toward the sewer grate, but very slowly. He didn't believe it was going to make it, at least not unless it started raining again. Number one kicked him in the hip and proposed beating him up. "Let him alone," number two said. "I like his sister. She got a hot bod." They went on their way. Willie waited until they were out of sight, then got up, pulled the damp seat of his pants away from his butt, and walked home. His mother and father were still at work. Roxy was somewhere, probably with one of her friends. Grandpa was in his room, looking at a game show on his TV. When Willie came in, he snapped it off. "You've got a bit of a hitch in your get-along," Grandpa said. "What?" "A limp, a limp. Let's go out on the back porch. I want to smoke." "What happened to you?" "Kid kicked me," Willie said. "I was watching a mole. It was dead. I wanted to see if it would go into the sewer or not." "Did it?" "No, unless it did after I left, but I don't think so." "Kicked you, did he?" "Yes." "Aha," Grandpa said, and that closed the subject. They went out on the porch. They sat down. Grandpa lit a cigarette and coughed out the first drag in several puffs. "Tell me about the volcano under Yellowstone," Willie proposed. "Again?" "Yes, please." "Well, it's a big one. Maybe the biggest. And someday it's going to blow. It'll take the whole state of Wyoming when it does, plus some of Idaho, and most of Montana." "But that isn't all," Willie said. "Not at all." Grandpa smoked and coughed. "It'll throw 1 billion tons of ash into the atmosphere. The crops will die worldwide. People will die worldwide. The internet everyone is so proud of will go kerblooey." "The ones who don't starve will choke to death," Willie said. His eyes were shining. He clutched his throat and went, "Grah!" "It could be an extinction event, like what killed the dinosaurs, only it would be us this time." "Correct," Grandfather said. "That boy who kicked you won't be thinking about kicking anybody then. He'll be crying for his mommy." "But his mommy will be dead." "Correct," said Grandfather. That winter, a disease in China that had been just another item on the nightly news turned into a plague that started killing people all over the world.
Here.
Hospitals and morgues were overflowing.
If you can't,
People in Europe were mostly staying
do it with the side
inside,
of
and
a
when they went
brush.
out, they put on
Try
masks.
to get very
Some
much
people in America
braced
also put on masks, mostly
and
if they were going to the supermarket.
a straight line like
It
that.
wasn't as good as a massive volcanic eruption at Yellowstone National Park, but Willie thought it was pretty good. He kept track of the dead numbers on his phone. Schools were shut down early. Roxy cried because she was missing the end-of-year dance, but Willie didn't mind. You didn't get a dance at the end of the year when you were remedial. In March of that year, Grandfather began to cough a lot more, and sometimes he coughed up blood. Father took him to the doctor, where they had to sit in the parking lot until they were called because of the virus that was killing people. Mother and Father were pretty sure Grandpa had the virus, probably brought into the house by either Roxy or Willie. Most kids didn't get sick, it seemed, or at least not very sick, but they could pass it on, and when old people caught it, they usually died. According to the news, in New York, the hospitals were using refrigerated trucks to store the bodies, mostly the bodies of old people like Grandpa. Willie wondered what the insides of those trucks looked like. Were the dead people wrapped in sheets, or were they in body bags? What if one of them was still alive, but froze to death? Willie thought that would make a good TV show. It turned out Grandpa didn't have the virus. He had cancer. The doctor said it started in his pancreas and then spread to his lungs. Mother told Roxy everything while they were doing dishes, and Roxy told Willie. Ordinarily, she wouldn't have done that. Usually, the kitchen after supper was like Vegas. What got said there stayed there. But Roxy couldn't wait to tell Willie the weirdo that his beloved Grandpa was circling the drain. Daddy asked if he should go in the hospital, she told Willie, and the doctor said if you don't want him to die in 2 weeks instead of in 6 months or a year, take him home. The doctor said the hospital is a germ pit, and everybody who works there has to dress like in a sci-fi movie, so that's why he's still here. Uh-huh, Willie said. Roxy elbowed him. Aren't you sad? I mean, he's the only friend you've got, right? Unless you're friends with some of your fellow weirdos at that school, which, Roxy made a sad wah-wah trumpet sound, is now closed, just like mine. What will happen when he can't go to the bathroom anymore? Willie asked. Oh, he'll keep going poop and pee until he dies. He'll just do it in bed. He'll have to wear diapers. Mom said they'd put him in a hospice, only they can't afford it. Uh-huh, Willie said. You should be crying, Roxy said. You really are a fucking weirdo. Grandpa was a cop in a place called Selma back in the olden days, Willie told her. He beat on black people. He said he didn't really want to, but he had to, because orders is orders. Sure, Roxy said. And back in the really olden days, he had pointy ears and shoes with curly toes and worked in Santa's workshop. Not true, Willie said. Santa Claus isn't real. Roxy clutched her head. Grandfather didn't last a year or 6 months or even 4. He went down fast. By the middle of that spring, he was bedridden and wearing adult Pampers under a nightgown. Changing the Pampers was Sharon's job, of course. Richard said he couldn't stand the stink. When Willie offered to help if she showed him how, she looked at him as if he were crazy. She wore her mask when she went in to change his diapers or give him his little meals, which were now pureed in the blender. It wasn't the virus she was worried about, because he didn't have it. Just the smell, which she called the stench. Willie kind of liked the stench. He didn't love it. That would be going too far. But he did like it. That mixture of pee and Vicks and slowly decaying Grandpa was interesting, the way looking at dead birds was interesting, or watching the dead mole make its final journey down the gutter, a kind of slow-motion funeral. Although there were 2 wicker chairs in Grandpa's room, now only one of them got used. Willie would pull it up beside the bed and talk to Grandfather. How close are you now? He asked one day. Pretty close, Grandfather said. He swiped a trembling finger under his nose. His finger was yellow now. His skin was yellow all over because he was suffering from something called jaundice as well as cancer. He had to give up the cigarettes. Does it hurt? When I cough, Grandpa said. His voice had grown low and harsh like a dog's growl. The pills are pretty good, but when I cough, it feels like it's ripping me up. And when you cough, you can taste your own shit, Willie said, matter-of-factly. Correct. Are you sad? Nope. All set. Outside, Sharon and Roxy were in the garden, bent over so all Willie could see was their sticking-up asses, which was fine. When you die,
Thanks for the alert, Cat.
will you know? I will if I'm
Sorry,
awake.
I didn't notice it before.
What do you want your last thought to be? Not sure. Maybe the flag boy at Gettysburg. Willie was a little disappointed that it wouldn't be of him, but not too. Can I watch?
Have a shout out, mate.
If you're here, Grandpa said. Because I want to see it. Grandpa said nothing. Will there be a white light, do you think? Grandpa massaged his upper lip as he considered the question. Probably. It's a chemical reaction as the brain shuts down. People who think it's a door opening on some glorious afterlife are just fooling themselves. But there is an afterlife, isn't there, Grandpa? James Jonas
Stick
Fiedler
another
ran that
coat
long
on
yellow
that
finger along the scant skin beneath
duster,
his nose
I
again,
think.
then showed his
Still
few remaining
smoky
teeth in
dry.
a smile. You'd be surprised. Tell me about how you saw Cleopatra's tits. No, I'm too tired. One night, a week later, Sharon served pork chops and told her family to enjoy them. Savor every bite, was how she put it. There won't be any more chops for a while. Bacon either. The pork processing plants are closing down because almost all of the workers have the virus. The price is going to go through the roof. A day no pigs would die, Roxy exclaimed, cutting into her chop. What? Father asked. It's a book. I did a book report on it. Got a B+. She popped a bite into her mouth and turned to Willie with a smile. Read any good first-grade primers lately? What's a primer? Willie asked. Leave him alone, Mother said. Father was on a birdhouse kick. A local gift shop took them on consignment and actually sold a few. After dinner, he went out to his little garage workshop to build another one. Mother and Roxy went into the kitchen to do the dishes and jabber. Willie's job was clearing the table. When it was done, he went into Grandpa's room. James Fiedler was now only a skeleton with a skin-covered skull face. Willie thought that if the bugs got into his coffin, they wouldn't find much to eat. The sickroom smell was still there, but the smell of decaying Grandpa seemed to be almost gone. Grandpa raised a hand and motioned Willie over. When Willie sat down beside the bed, Grandpa beckoned him closer. This is it, he whispered. My big day. Willie pulled his chair closer. He looked into Grandpa's eyes. What's it like? Good, Grandpa breathed. Willie wondered if he looked to Grandpa like he was retreating and getting dim. He saw that in a movie once. Come closer. Willie couldn't pull his chair any closer, so he bent down almost near enough to kiss Grandpa's withered lips. I want to watch you go. I want to be the last thing you see. I want to watch you go, Grandpa repeated. I want to be the last thing you see. His hand came up and grasped the nape of Willie's neck with surprising strength. His nails dug in. He pulled. You want death? Get a mouthful. A few minutes later, Willie paused outside the kitchen door to listen. We're taking him to the hospital tomorrow, Sharon said. She sounded on the verge of tears. I don't care what it costs. I can't do this anymore. Roxy murmured something sympathetic. Willie went into the kitchen. You won't have to take him to the hospital, he said. He just died. They turned to him, staring at him with identical expressions of shock and dawning hope. Mother said, Are you sure? Yes, Willie said, and stroked the skin between his lip and nose with one finger.
That was a creepy fucking story.
Annie Coughlin's Bad Dream. 1.
Okay, let's get a few highlights onto
It's a bad dream.
Preston's
Danny's
skin.
had a few
Like we
before.
sit and wait for
Everyone
other shit
has a
to dry.
nightmare from time to time, but this is the worst one ever. Nothing bad is happening at first, but that doesn't help. The sense of impending doom
We are
is so
using
strong.
Jasper
This actual
skin.
taste in his mouth. like sucking
for our
on a clump
highlight.
of pennies. He's walking along the shoulder of a dirt road that's been packed and
So let's
oiled to keep the
go
dust down.
a little bit on his
It's
schnozzle,
night. A quarter moon has just risen.
his
To
chin.
Danny, it looks like a sideways grin or a sneer. He passes a sign reading County Road F.
Bits on
Only
his
the O
cheekbone.
and the
We'll pull it.
Y have been spray painted over, and UCK has been crammed into the right of the F, so the sign now reads
Around the eye
Cunt
socket there.
Road Fuck. There are a couple of bullet holes for good measure. There's corn on both sides of the road, not as high as an elephant's eye, but maybe 4 feet, suggesting it's early summer.
Okay.
County Road F runs
just
dead straight up a mild rise.
Very edge of his ear.
In Kansas, most rises are mild. At the top is a black
And-
bulk of a
God.
building that fills Danny with unreasoning horror. Some tin thing is going tinka, tinka, tinka.
A little bit on his other
He
ear.
wants
there.
to stop. Wants nothing to do with that square black bulk.
I think that'll do that.
But his legs carry him on. There's no stopping them.
I think old Waylander is
not
going
in
to have to buy
control.
some new brushes soon.
A breeze gives the corn a bone-like rattle. It's chilly on his
So
cheeks
that's
and forehead,
done with for
and
now.
he realizes he's sweating. Sweating in a dream.
We'll do the
When he gets
wash.
to the top of the rise, calling it a crest would just be stupid. There's enough light to see the sign on the
before we
cinder
do the
block
metallics,
building.
I think. So
Reads
we'll leave again.
Hilltop.
His coat to
Texaco.
dry.
In front are 2 cracked concrete islands where gasoline pumps once stood. The tinka, tinka, tinka sound is coming from rusty signs on a pole out front. One reads
And of course,
Reg 199. One reads Mid 219. And the one on the bottom reads High Test 249. Nothing here to worry about, Danny thinks.
quickly
Nothing
check
here
our
to be
message
afraid
jars.
And he's not worried. He's not afraid. Terrified is what he is. Tinka,
And
tinka,
stupidly
tinka,
enough, the only
go the
message that we
signs
actually
advertising
have
long-gone
is
gas
on
prices.
our Discord
The
telling
big
me
office
that I'm
window
live.
is broken. Ditto the glass in the door. But Danny can see weeds growing up around the shards reflecting the moonlight, and knows that it's been a while since they were broken. The
So
vandals,
there we go.
bored country kids most likely,
Absolutely
have had their
fucking
fun
marvellous.
and moved on.
But we'll have a little
Danny
drinky
moves
poos.
on, too. Around the side of the abandoned station. Doesn't want to. Has to. He's not in control. Now he hears something else.
I'm going to ask again if anybody's doing anything
Scratching
interesting this evening. Have you got any
panting.
plans for the week ahead?
I don't want to see this, he thinks. If spoken aloud, the thought
hope
would
we
have come
have.
out as a
I hope
moan.
we've had a wonderful, wonderful time, and
goes
we've had a
around the
great
side,
weekend.
Kicking
I've had a pretty
couple
good
of
weekend.
empty motor oil cans, Heflin, the Texaco
Published a
brand,
video
out of
on
his
my
way.
YouTube
There's a
channel
rusty metal trash barrel,
yesterday. I hope
overturned
you
and
enjoy it and
spilling
you
more
can watch it.
cans and
Let's give you a
Coors
link to
bottles and
that.
whatever paper trash hasn't blown away. Behind the station, there's a mangy mongrel dog digging at the oil-stained earth. It hears Danny and looks around, its eyes silver circles in the moonlight. It wrinkles back its snout and gives a growl that can mean only one thing. Mine, mine. That's
this
not
is
for you,
the
Danny
video I
says,
put out yesterday
thinking,
about the box
"I
opening
wish
and my
it wasn't
thoughts
for
on
me,
the
but I think
new
it
release
is."
of Fallout
The
Wasteland
dog
Warfare,
lowers its haunches as if to spring,
which I'd had on
but
pre-order.
Danny's not afraid, not of the mutt anyway.
So I hope
He's a
you can all
town
have a
man
look
these
at that and
days,
tell
but
me
he
what you
grew up
think.
in rural Colorado where there were dogs everywhere, and he knows an empty threat when he faces one. He bends and picks
Because
up
that
an empty
video's not
oil
getting
can. The dream
a lot
so
of traction.
real, so detailed.
Unfortunately, but there
He
you
can
go. You
feel
can't
the
have everything, I
scrim
suppose.
of leftover
He
grease
says,
down the
muttering and
side.
mumbling to himself.
He doesn't even have to throw it. Raising it is enough. The dog turns tail and leaves at a
Another couple of
limping
minutes and
run.
that'll be okay for
Either
another
something
coat.
wrong with one of its
Let's get his
back
hair
legs
done
or
while we're
split
here.
pad on one of its paws.
What should we be using? I
Danny's
think
feet
we're
carry
using
him forward.
Intense
He
Hospitalia
sees
Black.
that the dog has scratched a hand and part of a forearm out of the ground. 2 of the fingers have been stripped to the bone. The fleshy
A
part of
brand
the
new
palm
bottle, never
is
been
also
opened
gone.
before.
Now
Woo,
on the
here we
dog's
go.
belly,
And it's from Wave 2 of the
around the
Vallejo
wrist,
Express Colour
inedible
range.
and thus of no use to a hungry dog, is a charm bracelet.
And being as it's never been
Danny
opened before,
draws in a breath and opens his mouth.
we've got a couple of
and
bolts to throw in.
Screams himself
as
awake,
they say.
sitting bolt upright in bed. A thing he's never done before. Thank God he lives alone, so there's no one to hear it. At first, he doesn't even know where he is. That derelict gas station seems like the reality. The morning light coming in through the curtains, the dream. He's even
Sure, we've
rubbing his
listened to this
hand
story
on
before.
the
Let's
royals.
go to the next
3. Only this one doesn't melt. 4. He turns on one of the computers and uses the librarian's code to unlock it. The passcode the kids use blocks anything resembling porn, also access to social media. With Mrs. Golden's, you can go anywhere. Not that Danny is planning on visiting Pornhub. He opens Firefox and types in Finn. Finn had a hard go of it from the very beginning. He slipped through the hands of a midwife who had delivered hundreds of babies and gave his birthday cry when he hit the floor. When he was 5, there was a house party next door. He was allowed out to listen to the music, the Pogues blasting from pole-mounted portable speakers on his side of the street. It was summer. He was barefoot, and a cherry bomb thrown by an exuberant partygoer flew up, arced down with the stub of its fuse fizzing, and blew off the baby toe on his left foot. Wouldn't have happened again in 1,000 years, his grandma said. At 7, he and his sisters were playing in Pettingill Park while Grandma sat on a nearby bench, alternately knitting and doing one of her word search puzzles. Finn didn't care for the swings, had no use for the seesaws, could have cared less about the roundy-round. What he liked was the twisty, an entrancing curlicue of blue plastic 20 feet high. There were steps, but Finn preferred to climb the slide itself on his hands and knees, up and around, up and around. At the top, he would sit and glide to the packed dirt at the bottom. He never had an accident on the twisty. "Stop that a while, why don't ya?" Grandma said one day. "You're always on that old twisty. Try something new. Try the monkey bars. Show me a trick." His sisters, Colleen and Marie, were on them, climbing and swinging like monkeys. So to please Grandma, he went on the monkey bars and slipped while hanging upside down and fell and broke his arm. His teacher that year, pretty Miss Monahan, liked to end each day by saying, "What have we learned today, kiddos?" At the urgent care, while having his arm set, the lollipop he was given afterward hardly seemed adequate compensation for the pain. Finn thought what he'd learned that day was stick to the twisty. At 14, running home from his friend Patrick's house in a driving thunderstorm, a stroke of lightning hit the street directly behind him, close enough to frizz his hair and char a line down the back of his jacket. Finn fell forward, hit his head on the curb, suffered a concussion, and lay unconscious in his bed for 2 days before waking up and asking what happened. It was Deidre Hanlon from across the street, one of the partygoers on that long-ago Pogues Day, although not the cherry bomb thrower, who saw him and fished the unconscious boy out of the gutter. "I thought poor old Finn was dead for sure," she said. His late father said Finn was born under a bad sign. Grandma, who never apologized for the monkey bars day, held a different view. She told Finn that for every stroke of bad luck God dealt out, he gave 2 strokes of the good. Finn thought that over and said he'd had no good luck to speak of, unless it wasn't being hit dead center by the lightning bolt. "You should be glad your luck's out," Grandma said. "Maybe it will come in all at once and you'll win the lotto, or a rich relative will die and leave you everything." "I don't have any rich relatives." "That you know of," Grandma said. She was the kind of woman who always got the last word. "When things go wrong, just remind yourself, God owes me, and God always pays his debts." Not soon enough to suit Finn, however. Worse luck awaited. One evening, in his 19th year, Finn came running home from his girlfriend's house, not because it was raining, but because even with a case of blue balls, all that hugging and touching and smooching had left him exhilarated. He felt he had to run or explode. He was wearing a leather jacket, jeans, a cabin Tilly cap, and a vintage T-shirt with the logo of an old band, Nazareth, on the front.
Wow.
He rounded the corner onto Peak Street and ran into a young man running the other way. They both fell down. Finn picked himself up and started to apologize, but the young man was already legging it again, looking back over his shoulder. He was also wearing jeans, a bill cap, and a T-shirt, which didn't strike Finn as particularly coincidental. In this city, it was the uniform of the young, men and women both. Finn carried on running down Peak, rubbing a scraped elbow as he went. A black tradesman's van came toward him, lights off. Finn thought nothing of it until it pulled up beside him, and some men, at least 4, came rushing out of the back even before the van had rolled completely to a stop. 2 of them grabbed him by the arms. Finn managed, "Hey!" A third man said, "Hey yourself," and pulled a bag over his head. There was a sting in his upper arm, just above his scraped elbow. He was aware of being hustled, feet not touching the pavement, and then the world flew away. When Finn came to, he was lying on a cot in a small room with a high ceiling. In one corner was a table lamp with no table beneath it. In another was a commode. The commode was blue plastic, exactly the same shade as the Twisty in Pettingill Park. There was no other furniture. There was a skylight, but it had been painted black in slopping, careless strokes. Finn sat up and winced. He didn't have a headache exactly, but his neck was terribly stiff, and his arm hurt the way it had after he'd gotten his COVID shot. He looked at it and saw someone had put a sticking plaster above his scraped elbow. He peeled it back and saw a tiny hole with a red corona around it. Finn tried the door and found it locked. He knocked, then pounded on it. As if in answer, AC/DC blasted at him. Dirty deeds done dirt cheap, at what sounded like 2,000 decibels. Finn clapped his hands over his ears. It went on for 20 or 30 seconds, then stopped. He looked up and saw 3 speakers mounted high up. To him, they looked like Bose models, which meant expensive. In the corner above the table lamp without a table, the lens of a camera stared down at him. Unlike the time when he had almost been struck by lightning, Finn remembered what had happened before he temporarily lost the plot and guessed what it meant. It was absurd, but not amazing. Being kidnapped was just another example of Finn Murray luck. He went back to pounding on the door and yelling for someone to come. When no one did, he stepped back and looked up at the camera. "Is someone there? Like monitoring this? If you are, please come and let me out. I believe you dropped a bollock. You want the other fella." There was no response for almost a full minute. Finn was walking back to the cot, having decided to lie down until someone came to rectify what was obviously a mistake when the speakers blared again. Finn liked the Ramones, but not at such apocalyptic volume in a closed room. This time, the sonic assault went on for about 2 minutes before cutting out just as abruptly. He lay on the cot and had just begun to drift when Cheap Trick roared down. 20 minutes later, it was Dexy's Midnight Runners. It went on that way for quite some time.
Do you know,
Probably
as Torture
hours.
goes, classic rock
There was
played
no
really
way
loud.
Finn
Doesn't
could
sound
tell
that
for
bad.
sure. His captors had taken his watch while he was unconscious. He was dozing when the door opened. 2 men came in. Finn wasn't sure they were the ones who had grabbed him by the arms, but pretty sure. One of them had a droopy eye. He said, "Are you going to be troublesome, Bobby-O?" "Not if you're going to make this right," Finn said. He took little notice of being called Bobby-O. Thought it was just some kind of nickname like Daddy-O, or how if his father had seen a drunk staggering up the street, he'd always say, "There goes Paddy O'Reilly." "That's up to you," the other said. He had a narrow face and black eyes like a weasel. They went out the door, Finn between the 2 men, who were both wearing chinos and white shirts. Neither of them had a gun, which was a bit of a comfort, although Finn had no doubt they could handle him easily if he decided to make trouble for them. They looked fit. Finn was tall but weedy. The room they came out in was lined with shelves, all of them empty. To Finn it looked like a pantry, or maybe, given the size, what his grandma would have called a larder. As a young woman, she'd been in service. From the pantry, they entered the biggest kitchen Finn had ever seen. There were a couple of empty bowls on the counter with spoons in them. Judging by the scum inside, he guessed they had contained soup. His belly rumbled. He didn't know how long it had been since he'd eaten. Ellie had made him some scrambled eggs before the necking started, but Finn had an idea that was long since digested. If digestion continued when you were unconscious, that was. He thought it must. A person's body just went about its business. Next came a dining room with a shining mahogany table that looked long enough to play shuffleboard on. Heavy, plum-colored drapes had been pulled all the way closed. Finn strained his ears for the sound of passing traffic and heard nothing. They went down a hall, and the droopy-eye man opened a door on the right. The weasel gave Finn a light shove. There was a fancy desk in the room. The walls were lined with books and folders. More drapes, a deep, dull red, had been drawn over the window behind the desk. A man with white hair,
Close work
combed
like that.
back like the
Give me
early Cliff
backache.
Richard, sat behind the desk.
Really must learn to
His
get better
tanned
posture.
face was scored with lines. He looked not much older than Finn's father had been when he died. "Sit down." Finn sat down across from the white-haired man. Mr. Droopy-Eye stood in one corner. Mr. Weasel stood in the other corner. They clasped their hands in front of their belt buckles. There was a folder in front of the white-haired man, thinner than the ones crammed in helter-skelter on the shelves. He opened it, lifted a sheet of paper, looked at it, and sighed. "This can be easy or hard, Mr. Feeney. That's entirely up to you." Finn leaned forward. "See, that's not my name. You have the wrong person." The white-haired man looked interested. He put the sheet of paper back in the thin folder and closed it. "Not Bobby Feeney. Is that so?" "My name is Finn Murray. That's Murray, with an I-E at the end, not A-Y. He felt that this detail alone should be enough to convince the white-haired man. It was so specific. "Is it now?" the white-haired man said. "Well, wonders never cease. I'll tell you what happened, what I think happened. When I came round the corner into Peak Street, I ran into a fellow running the other way. We knocked each other down. He got up and ran on. I got up and ran on. These fellas," he pointed at the men in the corners, "must have wanted that other fella, Bobby Feeney. He was dressed the same as me." "Dressed the same, was he? Cabin-teely cap, Nazareth t-shirt, leather jacket?" "Well, I don't know what was on the shirt, but I remember the cap. It all happened fast, but it's sure that's who you wanted. This happens to me all the time. The white-haired man leaned forward, his hands, scarred, Finn saw, or maybe burned, clasped on his thin folder. He looked more interested than ever. "You are taken into custody all the time, are you?"
There we go.
"No. Bad luck. Bad luck happens to me all the time." He told the white-haired man about being dropped at birth, and the cherry bomb, the broken arm because he let his grandma coax him off the twisty, the lightning strike. There were other things he could have added, but he thought the lightning strike and resulting concussion made a good place to stop, like the climax of a storybook story. "So you see, I'm not the boyo you're looking for." Huh. The white-haired man sat back,
I'll put away.
pressed a hand
Let's
to
get
his
some
belly as if
wash
it pained
out.
him, and sighed.
And we will be
Inspiration
using our
struck
own
Finn.
favourite.
"Just think about it, sir. If I was running away from these fellows of yours,
umber
I'd run
wash.
away. But I didn't, did I? I ran right into their outstretched arms, so to speak. It was the other fella, this Bobby Feeney, who ran away." "You're not Bobby Feeney?" "No, sir." "You're Finn Donovan." "Finn Murray, with an I-E. This should have been settled by now. That it apparently was not gave Finn a bad feeling. "Do you have any identification? Because if you had a wallet, it must be crammed up your arse. That's the only place we didn't look." Finn actually reached for his back pocket before remembering. "I left it at my girlfriend's house. We were sitting on the couch, lying on it actually, Ellie on top, and it was digging into my butt, so I took it out and put it on this little table with our cans of lager. I must have forgotten it." "Forgot it," said Mr. Weasel, grinning. "Stands to reason," said Mr. Droopy Eye. He was grinning too. "You see, we have a problem here already," the white-haired man said. Finn had another inspo. The unpleasant situation he was in, the unbelievable situation, really, although he had no choice but to believe it, seemed to be bringing inspirations on thick and fast. "I had my Odeon card in my pocket. I kept it separate in case Ellie wanted to go out to the Royale." He felt for the card. It wasn't there. The white-haired man opened his folder, riffled through the few papers inside, and brought out an orange card. "This card?" "Yes, that's it. See my name?" He reached for it. The white-haired man leaned back. Mr. Weasel and Mr. Droopy Eye unclasped their hands, ready to pounce, should pouncing be called for. The white-haired man held the card close to his face as if he were nearsighted. "Finn Murray, it says here, with an A-Y. Finn felt heat rising in his cheeks as if he had been caught in a lie. He hadn't been, but that was how it felt. People misspell names all the time. My father's name was Stephen, and people were always for spelling it with a V or even an F, like Stephen. The white-haired man slipped the Odeon card back into his folder. "Did you enjoy the music we had piped into your room?" "I know why you do that. I've seen it on telly. It's a tactic, like, to keep people on edge." "Ah, is that why we do it? Pando, did you know that's why we do it?" "Hard to say," Mr. Weasel replied with a shrug. "I have heard it said that music soothes the savage beast, although I'm not sure that speaks to your question." "We can arrange some Nazareth, if you like," said the white-haired man, "you being a fan and all." And with what sounded grotesquely like pride, "We have Spotify." "I want to go home." Finn didn't like the tremble he heard in his voice, but couldn't help it.
We have Spotify.
"You made a mistake, and I want to go home. I won't say nothing." He was sorry as soon as it came out. Kidnap victims were always saying it, and it never worked. He'd seen that on telly, too. Going home might also be arranged, and very easily. But first, you must answer one question. What did you do with the briefcase, Bobby? The one with the papers in it? For you surely didn't have it when you were brought here." Finn felt tears staying at the corners of his eyes. "Sir?" "Call me Mr. Ludlum, if you like. I used to call myself Mr. Dayton, but I got tired of it." "Mr. Ludlum, I'm not Bobby Feeney, and I didn't have any briefcase. I never did. I'm not who you're looking for. And while you're gassing at me, the fella you are looking for is getting away." "So, your name is Bobby Murray, with an I-E." "Yes. No. I'm Finn Murray. Finn." "Doc," the white-haired man, Mr. Ludlum,
I
nodded
think
to
a
the
very
one with the
thin down
droopy
green
eye.
wash over his
"Help this
duster when
fine
this
young
is
man to
dried.
remember his name." Doc
Might
stepped
work
forward.
there.
Pando, a.k.a. Mr. Weasel, grabbed Finn by the
Let's
shoulders.
get onto the face cam for
Doc
a
removed a
second.
heavy ring, put it in the pocket of his chinos, and slapped Finn across the face good and hard. Then he went the other way, even harder.
I am kind of
Spit
happy
flew
with
from
him.
the side of
Let's
Finn's
get him in
mouth.
front.
It hurt plenty, but what he felt most in that moment was
Try and work
astonishment
something out here.
and shame. He
Right.
had nothing to be ashamed
Paint.
of, but
Cam.
ashamed he was. "Now," Mr. Ludlum said, leaning back and clasping his hands on his midsection, "what is your name?" "Finn Mr. Ludlum nodded to Doc, who administered 2 more brisk slaps. Finn's ears rang. His cheeks burned. The tears came. "You can't do that. Why would you do that?
I think
You
it's
made a
getting there
mistake."
nicely.
"I can do it." Mr. Ludlum opened his folder and tossed a pamphlet across the desk. "Open-handed slaps are a world-approved technique for advanced interrogation. I think you should read that carefully before we talk again. See what other techniques we might decide to employ.
I think
Take
it's
him back,
stacking it
you
down
two.
nicely. We'll let
Mr.
that dry
Bobby
though, 'cause it's
Donovan
looking a
has
little
some
bit
homework
shiny.
to do." "You don't even know who
Let's
you're—"
see if
He
we
was
can
jerked to his
find
feet, Pando on one
a
side
final
and
dry
Doc on the
brush to
other.
pull it
Pando
together there
picked up the
before we put the
pamphlet
metallics on.
and stuffed it into the waistband of Finn's jeans. "Come along, Bobby-o," he said. "Ta-ta," said Mr. Ludlum. "Be a friend to
Quickly
all,
check
and
something.
all will be a friend to you." With that, Finn was hustled from the study with his cheeks burning and tears streaming from his eyes. Back in his room, his cell, Finn pulled the pamphlet free of his jeans and looked at it. There was no binding, not even a staple. It was just a few sheets of paper folded together. On the front, smearily printed and slightly askew, was this: "World-approved techniques, TECHNEEKS, for advanced interrogation, INTEROGATION. "Are you shitting me?" Finn asked. He spoke in a whisper, so the mics, surely there were mics as well as a camera staring down, wouldn't pick it up. His first thought was that the pamphlet was a joke, but the slaps hadn't been a joke. His face still burned. The first page of the pamphlet. Open-handed slaps. Okay. The second page. Sleep deprivation techniques, loud music, sound effects, etc. Okay. Third page. Threats to family members, fuck buddies, etc. Okay. Fourth. Enemas. Okay. Fifth. Stress positions.
The brush
Okay.
is way too big.
Sixth. Waterboarding. Okay. Seventh. Fist hitting, foot paddling, burning with cigarettes or lighters, LITERS, rape and sexual abuse, not okay. Eighth. If not specifically mentioned, probably okay. The rest of the pages were blank. "They can't even fucking spell," Finn whispered. But if it wasn't a mistake, or someone's macabre idea of a joke, it could mean he was in the hands of psychopaths. The idea was more terrifying than believing it was a case of mistaken identity. That could be resolved. One of his grandma's aphorisms, She had many came to mind. Most people will be reasonable if you speak soft and give them a chance. Because he had no better idea, he dropped the pamphlet on the floor, got up, and faced the camera. He spoke soft. My name is Finn Murray. I live at 19 Rowan Tree Road with my grandma and my 2 sisters, Colleen and Marie. My mother is away on business, but she can be reached on her mobile at... Finn reeled off the number. All of them will tell you I am who I say I am. Then what? Inspiration came, or logic, maybe both. Then you can put a bag over my head, even knock me out again if you feel like you need to, and drop me off on some random street corner. You can do that because I don't know who you are, and I don't know where this is. I don't have no briefcase, and I don't have no papers. Just, be reasonable. Please? He'd lost track of how many times he'd said please. Quite a few, for sure. Finn went back to the cot and lay down. He began to drift. Just as he was slipping away, Anthrax came ripping out of the speakers. Madhouse. He almost fell off the cot. He covered his ears. After 2 minutes that seemed much longer, the music stopped. He no longer felt sleepy, but he felt plenty hungry. Would they feed him? Maybe not. Starving a prisoner wasn't specifically mentioned, so it was probably okay. He slept. They gave him 4 hours. Then they came for him. Finn didn't see if it was Doc and Pando or some of the other ones. Before he realized what was happening, he was hauled to his feet, still mostly asleep. A bag came down over his head. It smelled vaguely of chicken dirt. He was propelled forward and slammed into the side of the door. "Whoops, sorry," someone said. "A little off course there, Bobby." He was yanked back and propelled forward again. His nose was bleeding, maybe broken. He snuffled up blood, choked, began to cough. They were moving him at suicide speed, his paddling feet barely touching the floor. They came to stairs, and he was driven down them like a hog in a chute. Near the bottom, they let go, and one of the men gave him a hearty push. Finn screamed into the bag, imagining a drop of 100, 200, 300 feet with broken-bodied death awaiting him upon touchdown. It was only 2 or 3 steps. His foot caught on the bottom one, and he went sprawling. He was grabbed again. Every time he pulled in a breath, the bag went into his mouth, and he tasted his own blood, fresh and still warm, set off by a soupçon of chicken shit. "Stop it!" he screamed. "Stop it! I can't breathe!" "Pull the other one, Bobby," one of them said. "The not breathing part comes later." His knees hit something
all
hard.
that time, it's just occurred to me.
Open-handed
all the
across
time
the
I
back
played
of the
Fallout,
neck, and he
I
fell
thought
forward
this
onto what
thing
felt like a
on
bench.
Preston's
"Gotta flip the omelet so it won't bend,"
probably
someone said
some
cheerily,
sort
and he
of
was turned
radio
over.
thing.
One of his flailing hands
It
hit
literally
something
just
soft.
occurred to me.
"Off my crotch, faggot," a
that
new
it's actually
voice said,
probably
and he was
supposed to
slapped
be
through
a
the
Geiger
bag.
counter.
"That's strictly my girlfriend's property." "Please," Finn said. He was crying, trying not to choke on the blood now running down his throat. His nose throbbed like an infected tooth. "Please don't. Please stop. I'm not the guy. I'm not Bobby Donovan." Someone fetched the side of his face a tremendous whack. "Bobby Feeney, you stupid git!" A cloth was draped over the bag. The first voice said, "Here it comes, Bobby." Boosh! Warm water soaked the cloth, then the bag, then Finn's face. He sucked water in and spluttered it out again. He held his breath. The water continued to pour down. At last he had to breathe. Instead of air, he sucked in water. He gargled it, choked on it, spit it out, swallowed more. There was no air. Air was gone. Air was a golden oldie, a blast from the past. He was drowning. Finn thrashed. The water continued to pour through the hood. There was no sense of drifting away, no peace, only the horror of the constant water. He reached for unconsciousness and couldn't find it. Only more water. At last it stopped. They rolled him on his side. He vomited into the bag. One of the men patted it gently all around. "A puke facial," he exclaimed, "and we don't even charge." They rolled him on his back and yanked the hood off. He was allowed a hand free to wipe his face. He coughed and coughed while he did it. At last his vision cleared enough for him to see Mr. Ludlam peering down at him. Because he was at the head of the bench, he looked upside down. "Are you Bobby Feeney or Finn Murray?" Mr. Ludlam asked. Finn was at first coughing too hard to answer. When it eased a little, he said, "Whichever you want. I'll swear to it. Just don't do it again. Please, no more." "Let's say investigation has proved to our satisfaction that you are Murray, rather than Feeney. Where is he?" "Who?" Mr. Ludlam nodded. One of the men, not Doc, not Pando, they weren't here, fetched him a terrific open-handed wallop. A mixture of vomit and water flew. "Feeney, Feeney, Feeney. Where is he?" "I don't know." "Where is the bomb factory? Last chance, my boy, before you enjoy another baptism." Finn coughed, choked, turned his head to the side, heaved, spat. "You said papers. Papers in a briefcase." "Papers be damned. Where is the bomb factory?" "I don't know anything about it." Mr. Ludlam nodded. The wet cloth went over Finn's face. The water began to flow. Soon he wanted to die. He wanted that more than anything, but he didn't. At last, semi-conscious, with the puke-stained bag once more over his head, he was brought back to his cell. He was no longer hungry. There was that, at least. The last thing Mr. Ludlam said before closing the door was, "It doesn't have to be this way, Finn. Tell us what Feeney did with the blueprints, and this can end." There were no blasts of music, but Finn was still unable to sleep for a long time. Every time he started to drift, a new coughing fit would shake him awake. The last one was so furious he thought he might pass out, which would be welcome. Anything to escape this nightmare. The skylight high above him sent a few slices of subdued light through the slopped-over black paint. Outside, in a world that was no longer his, it was daytime, and maybe early, maybe late, whichever it was. There were people out there going about their business with no idea that in this cell a young man with no luck but bad luck was trying to cough water out of his lungs. "For every stroke of bad luck God deals out," his grandma had said, "he gives 2 strokes of the good." "I don't believe it," Finn croaked, and finally fell asleep. He dreamed of Pettingill Park. Colleen was on the roundy-round. Marie was on the monkey bars, hanging upside down and picking her nose, a habit of which she could not be broken. Grandma said Marie would pick her nose on her deathbed. That elderly lady sat on a nearby bench with her knitting in her lap as she frowned over her latest word search. Finn climbed the spiral curves of the twisty on his hands and knees, and sat and slid down
gold
again and again and again. There were no musical interludes to interrupt this pleasant dream, which finally slipped away unnoticed, as dreams mostly do. He was awakened by Doc and another man, much older than the others, some unknown time later. They yanked him off the cot and hustled him back through the kitchen and dining room to the study where white-haired Mr. Ludlam awaited. White-haired Mr. Ludlam seemed a bit grizzled this morning. It was morning to Finn, at least. His eyes were rimmed with red, and there was what looked like a mustard stain on his shirt. His hands were folded on the desk again, and Finn observed his scarred knuckles looked swollen. Stained, too. Was that blood? Mr. Ludlum stared at him. Finn stared back, thinking of something else he'd seen on the telly. One of the boring and endless panel discussions on BBC that Finn's mother seemed to enjoy for reasons he and his sisters and grandma, who liked Coronation Street, EastEnders, and Doctor Who, could never understand. This panel had been talking about enhanced interrogation techniques, a.k.a. torture, and one of the panelists, a jowly man who looked like Prince Andrew might after a year in a dark room drinking milkshakes and eating double burgers, said that it never worked. Because if the poor fellow don't know what his interlocutors want to find out, he'll make something up. Stands to reason. It did stand to reason, and Finn was an inventive lad. Inventive enough to have gotten out of any number of minor scrapes at home, in school, and around the neighborhood. But inventive or not, he couldn't think of a story that would satisfy Mr. Ludlum and keep him from another near drowning. Finn could have made up a tale about the missing briefcase, could even have added in the blueprints. But was he supposed to say that the missing blueprints were stashed in a briefcase in the bomb factory? It sounded like something from that Cluedo board game. And what might come next? Stolen submarine parts? Hacked passwords to the bank accounts of Russian oligarchs? Meanwhile, Mr. Ludlum went on staring. "I'm hungry," Finn blurted. "Could I possibly have something to eat, sir?" Mr. Ludlum went on staring. Just when Finn decided he wasn't going to speak, that he was in some kind of trance,
So there we
Mr.
go.
Ludlum said, "How does the
That
full Irish
is
sound to you,
an hour and
Mr.
52
Hurley?"
minutes altogether.
Finn gaped. Mr. Ludlum laughed.
A
"Just
quick
yanking
dry
your
brush
lower
of
extremity,
something
Finn. Finn now,
along the lines of a
Finn
Xandri
forever.
dust colour
What do you say to
from
the whole
Citadel.
shooting match?
We'll
Eggs,
tie that all together.
bacon,
Then some
mushroom
weathering
mousse,
powders on the
and a
base.
nice plump banger
Call it finished.
with a
And
tomato
let's
for good
say
looks.
Preston Garvey.
Finn's stomach gurgled. That made Mr. Ludlum laugh again. Aston and
let's say Preston Garvey, start to finish, 2 hours. That's not too bad, I suppose. I'll think we'll call it a day there because I think you've all seen me dry brush and put weathering powders on before. So that is it. Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. I'll probably change it for something else next time. As ever, I've been Waylander. You've been absolutely marvellous. I love all your faces. And let's go raid some bugger.